James Gunn's Superman release, and it was a great movie, a phenomenal experience, and I think it was much needed for the time that the world is in right now. This ain't a review. This is a review about one of 8 characters featured on this poster. 6 characters could have been on here, but they aren't for some reason, but I want to talk about one of them. Funny enough, the cast being so large was something I was scared of going into this movie, but they all meshed so well and no one was left really too flat. So I want to talk about my favorite character that stood out in all of my 4 viewings. And when I say 4 viewings, I mean 4 viewings.
1, 2, 3, 4!
Out of all my viewings, one character kept on getting better and better in each time, and for me, it was Lex Luthor. Lex as a character in this movie is so many things, but if I had to break it down into one thing, I would say that he is a puzzle. But before I get into the meat and potatoes of what makes him so great, I want to talk about the little things. And from the big and all the way down to his little things, this is why Lex Luthor is just so goated. Enjoy. Lex looks so visually different from a lot of the characters in this movie. The way colors just stand out and pop at you in this movie is very reminiscent of James Gunn's films, but they're very unique. From Superman's reds and blues to the slightest of Ultraman's purples, they'd all just pop out and stand out at you. And I really mean the slightest of colors, but Lex Luthor just doesn't have that. He's dark, he's black, he's gray, and it makes him really good looking. And his visuals will always stand out because even when he's around his peers in similar colors, his bald head will just always give him that extra personality and aura. And I know it's part of his character design, but I don't really see why you would ever give him hair. And I'm really glad they never. Oh, okay. Lex Luthor is a very calculated man in this movie. Like, all of his actions have intentions. There's always some scheme, some ploy behind everything that he does in this movie, and I love it. In all of his interactions with every character that he meets, he knows how they will act, and there are very little holes in his plans. I want to talk and take a moment to really appreciate the steps he took to get that message from Superman's parents to take him down, because it was masterful on his end. So we start the film with Superman losing a fight for the first time, and he lands in the middle of nowhere in Antarctica, assumingly leaving the fight and flying back home, but making a crash landing. And on the surface, this is just a lowering and humbling experience for Superman, but after you realize and you think about the film as a whole, you realize it is a masterful stroke of genius from Lex Luthor to let him leave the fight and try to see where Superman goes after all of his bouts to heal and rest up, because clearly he just doesn't do it in the city. He flies away at Mach 10 to a random location, and once he figures out how Superman gets in with his DNA, he uses Ultraman from there, and then they can scour around the tower. But that is on the surface level of how great this plan is, and I want to go into a deeper level of what I found. So Lex Luthor allows Superman to escape their fight. This leads Superman to going home and Lex Luthor following him, and later he uses that information not only to get into his base, but then he paints him as a war criminal in an attempt to pitch an anti-Superman push in America. And then from there he breaks into the base, hacks the system, blah blah blah, gets a message. You've probably seen the movie, but just that being like the first act that he really starts building upon Superman was just really good to show how calculated he was going to be in this movie. And I want to talk about that meeting just a little bit more before I move on to my next point. Going off of him really knowing who he's talking to, I think that's best displayed in this meeting. I will say, him knowing everybody and giving them little descriptions before they actually like engage in an actual conversation, it was pretty like fun to see. It kind of reminded me of like those text boxes in like comic books that aren't bubbles but are like boxes for the readers to read to get a little bit of information about what's going to happen. But anyway, the way he speaks in this board meeting is definitely a little out of character, what we would expect from him. He goes from leaving his logistics approach to more of a fear-mongering approach. He kind of takes away from the evidence because it would give away a lot of his plans, and tries to attack more on the emotional side of the argument. When Rick Flag says this,
Blue stopped the war. Naive maybe, but well-intentioned.
it makes sense for him to let him have that point and then say, well, I don't know what his true intentions are. Do we really know? Making Superman seem like this mysterious figure kind of helps him build his argument. So when he slides his attention to Directive Crawley after she interjects herself into the conversation, we get this.
Arming Director Crawley.
The country of Arabia has purchased over $80 billion worth of arms from Luthor Corp in the past 2 years.
And
no one would profit more from a war with Arabia and Jaranpur than you. A cynic might say that having Superman out of the way might not be bad for business.
Well, what's particularly bad for business is dying.
And it's at that moment he completely shifts from going from his support of evidence and goes into his fear-mongering tactics, his emotional. He's saying that, well, we're going to die. If we let Superman run rampant, I have a fear that we are going to die. And as a Department of Defense, you kind of have to respect that opinion, that this Superman,
say that again,
if he's left unchecked, he could potentially be a big threat to society. But he's Lex Luthor, so of course Superman is checked. One of the biggest things about Lex Luthor's plans in this movie is that everyone and thing is accounted for, may it be words or people. Best painting for the words being countered are definitely in the board meeting, which I'll play a little montage now so I'm not just sitting here and spouting the same thing over and over again. Enjoy.
Admittedly, I'm not comfortable with a being from another planet as dangerous as him on the loose. But the optics? Superman is popular.
Less so every day, according to chatter online.
Not to mention the potential risk of failing to contain.
I assure you, Secretary, we can contain him.
Yeah, they got this stuff. What's this kryptonite stuff called?
It's called kryptonite.
Well, it kills him, right? As far as we can ascertain, there's none left on the planet.
I have a workaround for that. Well, it doesn't matter, Lex. Because without solid proof of malicious intent, it's just not worth the risk.
What?
Sorry if that felt a little weird. I was trying to avoid copyright. Spider-Man Homecoming, you have traumatized me. Congratulations, Disney, you won. I feel like that was like the entry-level, surface-level introduction to Lex Luthor's counters, but when you look down into the deeper layers of what is going on in the film and all the characters around, you kind of notice something else mostly going on with Planet Watch and how eerily similar they are to a lot of the combatants they face. Obviously, Ultraman is Superman's main counter, but it's a lot deeper than him being a clone of him that's just slightly stronger but also dumber. If you look at the fighting patterns that he taught him, I think this is the best portrayal of how smart Lex Luthor is, because we know he's analyzed over 2,500 different fighting styles and he's been studying him for years. But I think the true show of how well Lex Luthor knows how Superman fights is this clip right here.
10 line, 13B.
Lex could have just made a clone and had them duke it out, but he went the extra step to make sure that he was stronger than Superman. Not only did he analyze his fighting style, but he made 2,500 different fighting moves to take him on. These consisting of dodges, punches, and grabs, and even accounted for where the fight was going and where it was taking place. You have moves specific for if they're in the air, moves if they're on foot, and moves if someone is on the ground. It is just beautiful. He thought of everything. And then you have the engineer, and I think she is 2-for-1 in a situation where she is a counter to Green Lantern and Mr. Terrific. Her and Mr. Terrific did have a brief encounter, brief being him getting tackled into the ground and being immediately knocked out, but a counter is still a counter. She didn't do it in the film, but I can definitely see Lex Luthor thinking that her nanobite infused blood would be enough to hack Mr. Terrific's T-Spears, but at the end of the day, she just overpowered him when they finally did have an encounter, so I guess it really didn't matter. But how he describes the engineer to that board meeting, saying that whatever she can think of, she can create it with her nanobite technology, and that just really just said, hey, Green Lantern can do that, she can do that. Seems like they might have a go against each other. Unfortunately, they didn't in the film, but I can see Lex Luthor saying or thinking that would be enough to take down Guy Gardner. And finally, might be a little bit of a stretch, kind of lazy, but I would say the Raptors could be a counter to Hawkgirl. They're more of a catch-all counter, just being general foot soldiers, but maybe he would have the engineer and Ultraman fight the other two while leaving Hawkgirl surrounded by like 30 Raptor troops if they ever were to have an encounter with all four of them in the same room. Fortunately though, we'll never get to be able to prove this point because they only fought Mr. Terrific, who outsmarted them, and Superman and Krypto, who overpowered them. I feel kind of bad for them, man. I don't know why. I just feel like they kind of just have the worst job ever, and there's no amount of pay in the world that can justify the work that they do. Free them boys, man, for real. But another thing with these counters, it kind of plays a big part in the film because the film has to play around these counters. And that's why Lex and Krypto are so interesting when they matched up. Luthor had no way of knowing about the dog because it's not Clark's dog. So he doesn't have any direct counter, which ends up being the direct difference maker in this film. I think Lex only took him in because he wanted to learn something about him, find a weakness to exploit and learn about him to make a proper counter. And that's why Superman busting out of the pocket universe was so bad for Lex, because now he's losing the opportunity to learn about Krypto and he's lost possession of Superman. But losing that information about Krypto is what changed the films in the worst way for Lex possible, and I think that's hilarious. I think if he already knew about Krypto, he would have been way more covered in the final fight and probably would have just killed him, but that's besides the point. He took him in and he used him to rage bait Clark, which led him to lead Clark into the pocket universe and put him in jail. And having Clark rage baited by the fact that he kidnapped his dog and have it filmed and put over the media, I think that goes to show what Alex's greatest powers and what truly makes him such a great character. If I were to say Lex Luthor has a superpower, I'd sound crazy. But in this movie he does, and it's not flying or anything like that, but it's his image and public perception. And he does it so smooth and so masterfully that you won't even notice. All of his tricks and schemes do the same thing, make metas go down and make his own image go up. And he does this by mass manipulation, and what's so great about it is that he can just do it on the fly. For example, the very first fight we see with the Hammer of Baravia going against Superman, here, I don't think he was trying to completely erase his own image, but he was more focused on putting down Superman's by having Superman get his ass whooped in front of the entire city, and then boom, pin it on him after the fight and say that this is Superman's fault and that more danger is to come if Superman continues his actions. By putting down Superman, he subconsciously just raises your image of Lex Luthor in your brain if you are a citizen of Metropolis. And he is willing to do absolutely anything it takes to raise his own image above Superman's, and his primary way of doing this is just being willing to get rid of people who would boost Superman's image, including Superman himself, obviously. And him creating the Boravian military conflict was just was great on his part. It was great plan making on his part, because he knew Superman would fly in and stop it. And since Boravia is one of America's allies, he could use that fact to paint the fact of Superman being someone that is bad for America. So once Superman interrupts the Boravian conflict, he now has authority for the government to kill Superman. And since he's backed by the government to kill Superman, he could kill Superman without having any public backlash on his own image. And if by chance there were any would-be Superman supporters left remaining on the planet, clearly he didn't care too much on saving them. As the planet was splitting in two, there was a city in the way of the rift as it has now ripped through the newly evacuated Metropolis, headed towards a city, and he says that they chose Superman, so let them die. And this is exactly what was happening with Baravia in Jampur. Jampur's people were saved by Superman. That was now a country full of Superman supporters. So what was Lex Luthor willing to do? He was willing to let Baravia go into that country and kill everybody because they supported Superman. They chose Superman, so he was willing to let them die. He was attempting to create an entire space and bubble to where his public image outlasted everybody else. He wanted to get rid of Superman, get him out the picture, and then be the hero for the one doing such. And that is a lot of hard work and dedication going into a plan of such a scale. So when it started crumbling, or any given glimpse of moment of Lex Luthor's public image taking a shot backwards, it just hurts him so much more and he loses control. Which brings me to my next point of, as much as Lex Luthor's image empowers him, it makes him vulnerable and weak. Go back to Superman escaping the pocket universe and his crash out after. On the surface, this is a a freak out because yeah, the guy you just arrested has somehow made it out of your pocket universe, but the main issue is now it is up to being exposed for what it is, and he knows something to that scale will take a shot to his reputation a lot, and it ends up doing as such. And just in case you didn't know, because I myself had to go back to see this, but Superman could have just reported the pocket universe at some point in time, but it was already theorized because of, you know, Jimmy and Lois Lane did post an article, as Mr. Terrific says here. So not only did his plan fail, not only did his biggest enemy escape his plan, he can now be exposed for having an entire pocket dimension of people locked up. And the only other time we would see a meltdown from him on this scale is in the end, when he finally got exposed for everything he was due, the war on Jampur, trying to kill Superman, and all of his schemes and tricks blew up in his face, and his public image finally took a fatal blow. We don't see him act like this until he takes a complete shot to his public image, and that's the only time he freaks out like this. I do have a theory on why all of his plans and schemes try to keep the casualty count pretty low, besides, you know, the whole ripping through a city thing, but through the monster and the hammer of Baravia or whatever, he keeps the body count pretty low. And I think because this is trying to limit the distractions that it could cause from getting the important story out of Superman's failures and how Lex Luthor is saving us and blah blah blah. And that's why I do think something like the 1A speech was just so good, because it just shows a glimpse of just about everything I said in this video, and for me that's what makes him so great. So the fact that we can see a little bit of everything that I like about him in that one moment, that one monologue, that one speech, is just it's masterful. I love it. I can sit here and talk about this character all day. I love what James Gunn did with this character. And did he sacrifice Jor-El's rep to boost him up? Maybe just a little bit, but I mean, my God. And you know, Lex Luthor was just so good that even I cut my hair. Originally, I was going to go through and break down the speech for you, but this video is getting a little long. So, I mean, if you really do want to see that, you can let me know in the comments below. Hashtag release the Oshi cut or whatever fans say these days. But yeah, that's gonna be it for me. If you like what you saw today, make sure you leave a like, subscribe, and stay super.